Hello, welcome back to our series being Catholic and Christian Issues of Faith and Salvation. This is part 1E, the last of the parts for part 1. I'm going to cover the marks of the church. You probably have asked yourself sometime, are there any criteria against which you can measure any church and find out if they are the Church of Jesus Christ? And the answer is yes. We call them the marks of the church. I want to talk about labels among Christians because what we call each other and how we are called are two different things, and sometimes they are a source of division. Then I want to end this unit and this part with the timeline of the Catholic Church and the beginning of other Christian churches. Let's begin with what we introduced ourselves to a moment ago with the marks. What are the marks? The marks are clearly criteria for the Church of Jesus Christ. And they come to us from the Nicene Creed, written in 325 A.D. The Council of Nicaea was the first council of the church, brought together all the bishops of the known world and struggled with issues of the day. And the council fathers ended up by writing the Nicene Creed, which was affirmed again by the Council of Constantinople in 381. I believe in one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Let's look at one each at a time. The church is one. What did the fathers draw that from? Well, they looked at John's Gospel, chapter 17. Part of Jesus' high priestly prayer, the Last Supper in John's Gospel. Jesus prayed, Holy Father, keep them, referring to his apostles, and he's referred the entire prayer, keep them in your name that you have given me, so that they may be one just as we are one. A few verses later he says, so that they may all be one, as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they may also be in us, that the world may believe that you sent me. And Paul's letter to the people of Ephesus probably catalogs the definition of holiness. He says, there is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to the one hope that belongs to your call, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of us all. In his first letter to the people of Corinth, he says, because there is one bread, we who are many are one body, for we all partake of the one bread. In the 10th chapter of John's Gospel, Jesus says clearly, there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The church is holy. The church of the apostles certainly was holy. When we say that the church is holy, we mean, among other things, that she had the all-holy God as her author. In his letter to the people of Ephesus, Paul writes, Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her. Good word. Comes from two Latin words, sanctus, which means holy, and fatio, which means to make. That he might make her holy, like unto him, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In his first letter to his bishop Timothy, he wrote, Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners. The church is Catholic. The third great historical mark is that one true church is that the church is Catholic. Catholic means universal. It refers as much to the fullness of the faith she possesses as to the undeniable extension in both time and space that was characterized her virtually from the beginning. Mark's Gospel, chapter 16, which is the Ascension narrative, Jesus said to them, go into the whole world, proclaim the gospel to every creature. And Paul, in his letter to the people of Colossae, says the word of the truth in the whole world is bearing fruit and growing. The church is apostolic. Finally, the church that issued from the commission of Christ to the apostles was apostolic. Christ founded the church upon the apostles. In John chapter 6, Jesus said, did I not choose you, the 12? Jesus asked them. Putting that aside, let's move on to labels, the labels among Christians, how we're known and how we wish to be called. Believers in Jesus Christ as Lord are known by a variety of labels, some contradictory among themselves, and often divisive. Yet our God, remember this, our God is an author of differences. God made no two snowflakes alike, no two people alike. Believers must grow to know and respect differences among themselves. Differences can be of God. Division can be of Satan. Let's take the first word, church. We find it in Matthew's Gospel. He wrote in the 70s and 80s. The word church is a translation of the Greek ekklesia and the Hebrew kahal. The word is used only twice in the Gospels, in Matthew 16 and 18. The Greek and the Hebrew mean God's people. God's people called, convoked, formed by Him as the object of His designs. The word generally means the constitution of the community of those who will be sharers in salvation. Where does the label Christian come from? It comes from Luke in his Acts of the Apostles, again written sometime in the 70s and 80s. The term Christian is used to denote the followers of Jesus Christ. In Acts 11:26, he records that it was in Antioch that the disciples were first called Christians for the first time. How about the word Catholic, small c? This comes from St. Ignatius of Antioch, about 110 AD. It's found in the Apostles' Creed, I believe in one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. The word comes from the Greek katolika, which means universal. It was used as early as the end of the first, early 2nd century by Ignatius of Antioch. He died 110, so it had to have been written before then. With a capital C, it goes back to about the year 400. The word denotes the Roman Catholic Church and its believers. The technical use of the word to denote the Roman Church seems to have been established by the beginning of the 3rd century. The Catholic Church rightly uses the word in that its beliefs and practice have been believed everywhere, always, and by all. This is what is truly and properly Catholic. Notice I'm beginning the timeline, 2,000-year timeline here, and placing dates when we have them on that timeline. Greek Byzantine, that term comes from the 5th to the 6th century. The label signifies Eastern and Greek-speaking Christians and their theology. The term is used today to indicate Greek-speaking Christians who are in union with the Bishop of Rome and accept the authority of Rome. So Greek Byzantine churches are in union with Rome. Greek Orthodox churches are not in union with Rome. They began with a division in 1054. These are Eastern and Greek-speaking Christians and their theology. These are the Greek-speaking Christians who broke with the Bishop of Rome in 1054 and no longer accept the authority of Rome. The term Protestant, of course, has its origin with Martin Luther. His dates are 1483 to 1546. It denotes Christians who trace their origin to the Reformation precipitated by Martin Luther in a move to reform the Catholic Church in the 16th century. Their aim was to restore the Christian faith as it had been at its beginning. In a word, they protested the abuses in faith and practice found in the Catholic Church during the Middle Ages. The term Reformed is used, too, within the Protestantism, and it really comes from Zwingli, whose dates are 1484 to 1531, and Calvin, 1509 to 1564. This label is used for those Protestant Christian believers who follow the doctrines and polity of the Protestant reformers Zwingli and Calvin rather than the Lutheran tradition. The chief distinction is in the belief in the Eucharist. Their faith holds a memorial view of the sacrament, where Luther continued to hold a consubstantial view of Christ in the Eucharist, that Christ is present when the believer receives, not before and not after. When we speak of Christian movements, we often hear the term revival or revivalism. It was applied to the reaction against intellectual and formalistic tendencies in Protestantism in the 18th century, so the 1700s. Revivalism stresses conversion and a concern for the poor. It denotes the popular movement among Christians that makes a direct appeal to emotional religious experience. Methodism, founded by John and Charles Wesley, best typifies revivalism. Adventist churches and holiness churches are examples of revival churches in the United States today. The term evangelical comes from two Protestant, an author, Spencer and Wesley, of the Wesley brothers. This label denotes a movement in modern Anglo-American Protestantism with European roots, which emphasizes personal commitment to Christ and the authority of the Bible. The word evangelical simply means pertaining to the gospel. Euangelion is the Greek word. It means good news. The largest U.S. Protestant body, the Southern Baptist Convention, embraces evangelical tenets. Others are, if you know, Pentecostals, They would be evangelical, the charismatic renewal, including Catholic Christians and Black Baptist churches. By the way, the major evangelical publication of the evangelical churches is Christianity Today. How about that word Pentecostal? Well, as a church denomination, it began in 1906 in the United States. The label denotes both the faith and practice of those who profess belief in the experience of holiness and Christian perfection. This perfection is climaxed by an infilling of the Holy Spirit, as evidenced by speaking in tongues as experienced by the apostles on Pentecost in the year 30 AD. Pentecostal beliefs are drawn principally from Methodist and Baptist tenets, and are usually fundamentalist. The Church of God of Prophecy is an example of a Pentecostal church. The word fundamental, it's a label first used in the 1920s, Bible truths. The fundamental truths professed are these: first, the infallibility of the Bible, then the virgin birth, the divinity of Christ, the sacrifice of Christ on the cross as atonement for the sins of all people, physical resurrection, the second coming of Christ, and the bodily resurrection of all believers. Now, some denominations which are fundamentalists are the Southern Baptists, the Church of Christ, the Assembly of God, Four Square Gospel, and the Church of the Nazarene, and many others. Today you hear a lot about non-denominational or interdenominational churches. These are of the 20th century. They are used to distinguish those professing Christians who follow generally a fundamentalist and or an evangelical lifestyle. While they eschew the labels of historical denominations, their labels have become the new denominational labels. They adhere to a Bible-only rule of faith and morals and dismiss the doctrinal conflicts which spawn the historical Protestant Christian denominations. Charismatic. People often ask, what do we mean by that? It comes from the Greek word charismata, meaning spiritual gifts. The charismatic movement is an international, interdenominational, Christian revivalist movement. Believers have been filled or baptized with the Holy Spirit. Spiritual gifts are then received, such as of healing and the interpretation of tongues. If you want to know more about this whole phenomenon, look at St. Paul's first letter to the people of Corinth in the 12th chapter. It's almost all devoted to these phenomena. The movement appears to have found its contemporary manifestation through the Pentecostal churches in the early 20th century. The Catholic Charismatic Movement traces its roots to university campuses, for instance, Notre Dame in 1967. Today, the University of Steubenville is the center of the Catholic Charismatic activity. The movement received papal approval in 1975 by Pope Paul VI. The leading international proponent among the hierarchy was Cardinal Leon Sunens of Belgium. A national magazine of the Catholic Charismatic Movement in the United States is the New Covenant magazine. We bandy the term traditional around. What do we mean by traditional? It's often used to denote those believers who look to a long-standing belief or practice within the church as essential to their faith life. Literally, to be traditional means you to hold fast to the truths which have been handed down to you. In Catholic Christianity today, to be traditional often denotes the period of belief and practice before Vatican II. And to those who hold doggedly to the unrenewed faith and practice of church life before Vatican II. The term Orthodox, now I capitalize it as the label there, but I mean a small o, not to be confused with Greek Orthodox. The term Orthodox with a small o is applied increasingly today to those Catholic Christians who are faithful to the biblical, historical, and theological foundations of the teaching authority of the Bishop of Rome and the bishops of the world, teaching in unity with the Bishop of Rome. Orthodox Catholic Christians are perceived as both conservative and evangelical. What of this term conservative? It's usually applied to that Christian faith and practice which focuses on a very strict and narrow interpretation of both the biblical teaching and church teaching. The word liberal, hence the word liberal, is applied to Christian faith and practice, what is usually denoted in a loose and broad interpretation of both the Bible and church teachings. Today, the accent on the so-called social gospel is often viewed as a liberal emphasis on faith and practice. Christians differ by denominational and non-denominational labels also. As individuals and groups disagreed with each other, they often broke faith fellowship to begin and continue their own faith fellowship. The study of history presents a story of increasing differences among Christian believers and a proliferation of denominational labels. It is said from their own sources that there are in Protestantism alone 33,000 different Protestant denominations, as many as 600 new ones every year. Let's take a look as we close this section in part 1 of our series, a genealogy of Christian faith communities. This is a timeline. I will change it and let you know when I change it to get more information in it. But this is a walk through from the birth of Christ, the foundation of the church, the maintenance of the church, and then the Reformation period. We do place Christ's birth about 4 BC. That can be explained, as I will in another series. We make the date of the church's birth to be about 30. That would be Pentecost. One of the first expressions of the faith of the early church is found in the Council of Jerusalem about 50 AD. You can read about that in the Acts of the Apostles. We understand that the 4 Gospels were written between 65 and 100 AD. Mark in 65, 66, Matthew and Luke sometime in the 70s and the 80s, and then John at the end of the 1st century. And with his death in the year 100, we end the apostolic age. Now we look at the 2,000-year timeline that I have here. The Council of Nicaea, the one we began this section with, 325 AD. The Council of Constantinople in 381. Ephesus in 431. Of Chalcedon I in 451. The local Council of Carthage in 397 established the 72 book of the Bible, followed by the Council of Constantinople II in 553 and the Council of Constantinople III in 680. Council of Nicaea II in 787, the Council of Constantinople IV in 879, the Council of Lateran I, the first in the Western world. All the others, if you look at the names, are all Greek names. The Council of Lateran I in 1123, followed by Lateran II in 1139, and then Lateran III in 1179, Lateran IV in 1215. Then the Council of Lyon in France, Lyon I in 1245, Lyon II in 1274. I mention these churches, these councils, within the church because these are the ways differences and difficulties and error was corrected and articulated. We begin the Council of Vienna II in 1312, Council of Constance in 1414, a Council of Florence in 1438, and then the Fifth Lateran Council in 1517, followed by the Council of Trent in 1545, and then First Vatican Council in 1870 and the Second Vatican Council in 1965. Now I will change the timeline in order to articulate the break of the reformers in the church. We begin with the Lutheran break in 1517, the Reformed Protestant movement in 1520, Anabaptists in 1525, and in this period, of course, with Luther, the 66-book canon of the Bible was established. I placed Council of Trent, we've already seen it, and the Vatican I and II, but continuing with the Reformers, the Presbyterian Church in 1560, the Baptist Church in 1612, and the Methodist Church in 1787. Now, we do not have all Protestant churches, we only have the historical churches here. I have another timeline on my website that gives all the churches and the time of their creation. Okay, we have finished the Catholic and Christian Part 1E. Go on now to the second part, Divine Revelation by Letter, Part 2A.